I'm just very excited to be able to present this information here today. We'll be talking about ephemeral art, here today and gone tomorrow. So when we first start talking about horological art, what do you think of? You think of painted tablets, dials, columns, splats, engraved plates or cases, or other ornamentation that might be part of a clock or watch. You may be thinking of horologically themed items such as wall pockets or Christmas decorations, or you may be thinking about murals, paintings, prints or photographs, or even movies that include images of timepieces. But what other art form is there that's around us on a daily basis, even today, that we dispose of without a second thought? And if your answer is advertising art, you're correct. And more specifically for today's discussion, we're going to be talking about the wonderful art that appeared on 19th century advertising trade cards. It was art that was created before the advent of color photography or computer-generated images. It's art that gives us a glimpse of beauty, a smile, or perhaps a chuckle, as well as a peek into turn-of-the-century American life. So let's start by taking a look at the brief history of trade cards. Then we'll talk about how they were made, how they were distributed, who the artist might have been, different types of trade cards, as well as what we can learn from trade cards. So for a brief history, back to the 18th century. The earliest trade cards were made around 1700. The means of printing, which was engraving, already existed, but it was fairly costly, and there was no need for trade cards. If you think about it, trade cards are advertising. And if you only have one blacksmith in a town, you only have one general store, there's not much competition. So there's really no need to advertise. You just go into the town or the village. You know where to go because they probably had a sign up. So as commerce became more competitive, the need developed. The first examples were printed cards or sheets to advertise the offerings of specific tradesmen, and they were primarily used in London or other large commercially competitive British cities. But as you might guess, as America grew, so did commerce, and soon these cards spread to America. The ones that were engraved were usually illustrated, and they relied on visual appeal and wit to attract the attention of customers. But fast forward just a little bit to the 19th century. In the 1820s, lithography arrived in America, and trade cards became readily accessible to businesses and manufacturers. The cost to produce the cards by lithography was relatively lower than engraving, because the cost to create an engraving and the cost to compare a lithographed stone were not very comparable. So, and as well as the lithographed stones were able to make about 2,400 copies before having to be recreated. That gave us a relatively lower cost of about 1/7 the cost of a like number of engraved cards when compared to lithography. And the larger dimensions were possible, so they weren't limited to what size they could make these from their printing presses. By the 1860s, lithography in multiple colors was available. And if you think about it, at this time, it could be that the only place someone had seen something in full color might have been in a painting or a decoration on ceramics or things like that. They were not accustomed to seeing printed versions of full color. So as you might guess, public interest really grew. By the 1870s, there was a shift to full color printing, and it's called chromolithography. That's why you may hear these cards referred to as chromolithographs or chromos. You'll sometimes hear when people are talking about trade cards. By 1876, which was the time of the Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia, all of the elements were in place for dramatic expansion. Then by the 1880s and 90s, trade cards became a pervasive advertising medium in the United States. 1870 to 1895 were considered the peak of trade cards, And some even go so far as to narrow it down to 1893, or the Columbian Exposition in Chicago, as the actual peak. And then 1898 to 1918 was the golden age of postcards. So you might be thinking, okay, so what's the difference between a trade card and a postcard? Primarily, trade cards had an image on the front and advertising on the full back side, whereas a postcard might have the image on the front, but at least half of the back of the postcard was available for addressing and postage to be applied. So if it has a place for postage on the back of it and an address, then it would be a postcard. And those, in general, came slightly after trade cards. And how did they get to us? We see so many of them around today. You might see an old scrapbook of cards. You may see cards lying about in an antique shop, or you may just see them in a few marts. I haven't seen too many available for us in the marts, but I'm hoping that will change. So we look at how they were distributed. First off, they could be distributed to dealers by manufacturer. If we look at this Waterbury card on the front, we see that it's advertising the Series J watch, and it was stem set with secondhand for sale only by retail watch dealers. But always turn a trade card over whenever you're looking at it, if possible. Not only will it give you an idea of the condition of the card itself, it also can give you additional insight. When this card's turned over, we see that these cards will be sent free of cost in lots of 100, 200, or 300 to any recognized retail watch dealer asking for them. If that isn't enough cards, hey, just send us a letter. We'll send you some more. And there will be no printed matter upon the backs. This entire space being left for each dealer to utilize as may be desirable. So when you come across a card like this, you may see that it has printing on the back similar to this. You may turn it over and it will have a stamp of some jeweler who was passing out these cards for advertising. As you can see here, the brunt of the cost of the advertising was from the manufacturer rather from the watch dealer. Other ways they were distributed, they could go to consumers and products. As you see from this one, it's from David's Prize Soap. A gold watch? Really, this is grand. Why, the soap itself was worth double the cost. And you look at this lovely lady who's doing her laundry. Although these are likely clouds of steam around her, they're made to look like angelic clouds with an angel giving her a gold watch. And if you look in the angel's pouch of prizes there in the back, like a good old Santa Claus, you'll see that there's actually a house sticking up out of it. So when we look at the back, you find out that although this is for prize soap, the list of presents that could be had in addition to that gold watch, the first place prize was a brick house and lot in the city of New York. Can you imagine saving enough soap wrappers, although there were no small things, no cheap things, and every ticket had an even chance? You had to have 20 soap wrappers for one ticket. So it makes me wonder what effect this had on the sale of the merchandise. You know, for people to think they could win a brick house and lot in the city of New York, they could win 5 100 bonds, grand pianos, diamond bracelets, gold watches, silver watches, let's see, tea and dinner sets, mantle clocks, all sorts of things that they could win from this. Again, trade cards distributed through the products in order to advertise their products. This one, if you'll notice at the bottom, it says, ask your mother to read the other side. So we'll find that often the imagery was targeted to children because it was children who were collecting these cards. I don't know how many of you ever did this, but I can remember going to the store with my mother when I was young. Anything that was there on the little tear-offs and things like that on the shelves that you could pull and collect, by the time we got through the store, we would have a whole handful of things to collect. And it was very similar with the trade cards. The children would go in, they would collect them, and then they would take them home and glue them in a scrapbook. But this one specifically says, ask your mother to read the other side. This came in a can or a package of baking powder. And with this, you could get a handsome, fancy card, and it's worth all you can give for the powder. And with each half-pound can, he will give you a large, handsome, mounted card fit for the parlor. So, again, we think about affordable art for the home. If you're offering someone a nice print with a pretty picture to hang in their parlor, who wouldn't want to do that? So if you look at trade cards, I'll say, always look at the back of it, because the insight that it gives to us of what industry and family life was like at that time can be amazing. But they did know their target. They knew that the children were the ones who were collecting these, and they knew that children would show their mama. So always do look at the back. They were also distributed to consumers by stores. This one actually is very similar to our coupon wallets that we have today. The two pictures on the left show the front and the back of this beautiful faux reptile wallet. Whenever you open it up on the inside, it has advertising for the product as well as advertising for the manufacturer on the right. And inside was included a card. And it said, this card case is presented with the compliments of R.L. Dickinson, Harper, Ohio. And of course, there's just a few facts on the back of the card that tell you about how valuable it is if you were to actually buy the products that are being advertised. In the meantime, you can collect your trade cards here, take them home, put them in your scrapbook. So, none of these that we've looked at so far have had particularly beautiful art, but some of them had amazing art on them. In fact, in December 1882 article in the New York Times called High Art on Cardboard, Picturesque Advertising, the Wonderful Growth of the Trade, it says, the rage for picturesque advertising, which has marked the present popular renaissance in art, has excited the keenest competition in the production of beautiful designs and attractive novelties. The business in advertising cards has grown to enormous proportions, and the best talent in the country is employed in designing them. Work of this sort is well paid, and a first-rate hand can command $100 a week or more. Can you imagine an artist at that time being able to make $100 a week by drawing imagery or paintings to be used on trade cards? That was very good pay. So I'm sure that there was stiff competition among the artists too. The article went on to say that one line of cards had sold no less than 200 million cards. The prices for the cards ranged from $2.50 to $50 a thousand, and some of the more expensive cards were really works of art. And these cards led to the popularity of Christmas and New Year's cards, as well as cards for other holidays. It said that one dealer had a competition with large prizes for the artists, and they also used agents in order to collect novelties in the ephemeral art. Interestingly, some were imported from London, Paris, and Berlin, and some of the holiday cards sold for as much as $10 each. These were likely very intricate and may have also been embossed and of a larger size. The foreign cards, amazingly, were copied to some extent, but they didn't consider it honorable to copy or adapt designs from the American manufacturers, but it had been done. And to prevent this, one well-known house copyrighted the designs as fast as they were issued. And this may be the reason a lithographer's name or copyright data is shown on some cards, which is really helpful for us because there are books that list the known lithographers and the dates that they were in business. This helps us to date some of the trade cards so that we know that when they were produced. We do have to be careful, though, when we're looking at the copyright, because we may not know if it's the copyright of the lithographer or a copyright of the manufacturer. So there could be a variety of copyrights there, but you can always look it up. You can go online and look up and see if there is a copyright listed there as to when it might be. And Louis Prang was one well-known lithographer. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the name Prang, but it's a name that we still see today on art products. I know whenever I've gone to the hobby shops, I see colored pencils, different artist supplies that have Prang prominently displayed on the product, and this is the same Louis Prang that created trade cards and imagery back in the late 1800s. And he developed the idea of mass-producing small cards that could be inexpensively adapted to the needs of individual advertisers. This would be one image, and then it could be adapted either with text on the front of the image or on the back, and these are called stock cards. You'll find whenever you're talking to different people about trade cards, some do not consider stock cards to really be in the same class as those that were created specifically for a different product. So just be aware that some people may kind of look down their noses at stock cards, although I think the imagery on them is beautiful, and they definitely served a purpose. Other large lithographers soon followed Prang's idea, so he was very much a trendsetter. This is a Prang holiday card from 1882. It's a Valentine's Day card. It does have the copyright down in the lower right-hand corner, but you can see this is a beautiful picture, and it's a rather large one. I don't remember the exact size of the card, but it's bigger than a normal trade card, and it has fringe, silk fringe around the outside of it. And on the flip side is another image, not quite as impressive, but this way too, they had something so that they could put the fringe in the middle of the card, have something to stick on the back that's still pleasant to look at. The back side is not printed with a copyright date, so I have no way of knowing whether this was a Prang image or just one that some manufacturer put the Prang image on the front and a less expensive image on the back. One of the artists that we do know, there were not many in the horological cards that signed their names, but one that we can identify is George Folsom. He lived 1859 to 1919, and he was one of the first artists to make pen and ink newspaper illustrations. He also illustrated the book called Recollections of a New York City Chief of Police, and in the frontispiece of this book, it says, the illustrations of this work are from original drawings by the following well-known artists. And the list does include the name of George Folsom. Most of the artwork in this book he signed just with the print, all cap letters, Folsom. But when we get to trade cards, we find he signed it somewhat differently. These are 4 different trade cards for the Keystone Watch Case Company. And if you look in the upper left one, that's outlined there with the dotted white line, you'll see he signed it GF. In fact, all of these are signed GF. The Keystone-shaped cards, it's in the margin on the lower right side. And in the lower right card, in the Keystone that's printed on the card, he also signed GF. So all of these cards, they're very recognizable. They have the black, they're for Keystone, and they have a little coin there. So if you ever see a card like this, look around and see if you can find the GF located on it. There are other lines, either earlier or later from Keystone, that he did not illustrate, and we'll see some of those a little later. But these that have the black background, the colorful imagery, and the little poems were the ones that he illustrated. These are cards for the Boss Watch Case Company, and they're signed with the letter F, as you'll see in the lower right-hand corner of the uppermost picture, and in the bottom part of the palette of the lower picture. So Keystone will have GF on them, Boss will have F. But again, both are attributed to George Folsom. Another name that we hear, And although this isn't a trade card, this is actually a postcard. They're illustrated by R.F. Outcault. He was a contemporary of Folsom, but his work had taken a slightly different slant. He started out working for Thomas Edison as a technical illustrator. Then he went on to become a cartoonist for several large newspapers, and he created the Yellow Kid cartoon character. And he also created the ones we're probably most familiar with, which is Buster Brown and Ties. So I guess you might say that he also created imagery for watch dials as well as the cases, because there are commemorative watches or advertising watches for Buster Brown shoes that have the image of Buster Brown and Ties on the imagery, on the watch dial or the back of the watch itself. And he's best known in horological trade cards for his series of Rockford calendar cards. So whenever you look at these, I don't know if any of you have ever noticed before on these cards, there is one for each month. The time on the clock corresponds to the month. So like January of 1910, January is 1 o'clock. April is 4 o'clock. June, the dials of the hand are at 6 o'clock, as is the little sundial there. And October is 10. But you will find somewhere on each of these cards that they were copyrighted by Mr. Outcault. So please be aware of that. He is the one who created these cards. And the back side of them, half of it shows Rockford advertising, and the other half is for the address and the postage. These aren't in great shape, but they were given to me, so I was thrilled to actually have examples of these that we were able to look at here today. Another kind of card that you might see is a jeweler trade card. These are similar to today's business cards. Several of these are fairly simple. They're engraved. They're somewhat different from what we see today in that today we see more consistency in the iconography, the printing that's used, the different fonts. But back then it looks like almost every line had a different font, I guess to draw your attention to the different parts of the card. And on the bottom row, these are actually two different cards for the same jeweler. One is a very simple engraved card, and the other one is actually a bronzed card. It has a silver metallic finish in the background with a beautiful image of flowers, and then the logo, the white part where anybody could could imprint or stamp their information. The bronzed cards were made very similarly to the way we do bronze stenciling on columns or on glass. They could have a layer of varnish that was put down. The powder was put on. You can imagine going through a printing press how quickly this had to have been done. And all that powder that was blowing around was not good for the people who were creating the cards. So it could be slightly dangerous to work in a place that was doing these bronzed cards, but they do make a very attractive card, and even after all these years, the bronzing is still there. Here's a group of 4 bronzed cards. These have the gold bronzing in the back. As you can see, it is a series. 3 of them are for the same jeweler, but one is for another jeweler. And Justin B. Rose cards had a very, very fancy iconography, while in the other one it's more simple. Novelties for the holidays, Benjamin and Ford Jewelers, printed and underlined, still gets your attention, but doesn't carry quite the same impact, I don't think, as those with the more decorative iconography on them. These are also stock cards. They could be used by anybody, except this one was for the Columbus Watch Company. To be on time, carry a new Columbus watch, and the reverse side of both of these cards shows the illustrated ruby watch made by the new Columbus Company. So although these were not made specifically for the Columbus Watch Company, they definitely served the purpose. They were printed with the Columbus information both on the front as well as on the back. And here's another example. The one on the left is actually embossed. Same young man with the envelope on the front, ready to be printed. It's a totally blank card, whereas the one on the right is actually a hang tag that was attached to a H. Muir's and Sons watch case opener from the Columbian Exposition. Then we also have die-cut cards, cards that are cut in a specific shape. The one on the left is a giveaway where the Waterbury watch was almost given away. You just had to collect a certain number of subscribers to the Orange County Farmer magazine, send it in, and you could get your watch. The one on the right is from the Rockford Watch Company, and it folds closed. You open it up and you see the cow, as well as the advertising for the watch. You may occasionally see these. These are not die-cut cards, but it was very popular at that time because children were targeted to create imagery that the children could cut out and then paste into their books. And I've seen some that are really extravagant where people overlap them or combine several to make a scene. So you may see this. If you look on the back, you'll likely see that all of the text is not there, like this one for celluloid eyeglasses on the front. On the back, it's for Elgin watches. But you missed just a little bit of the advertising because it has been cut out in the shape of the palette. But those are not die-cut cards. Although they are in a shape, they were not originally created that way. Then we have anthropomorphic cards. These are cards where they either give an animal or an inanimate object human qualities. All of these, let's see, the two in the corners, the left uppermost corner and the right bottom corner are for the Boss Case Company, whereas the opposite ones are for the Keystone Watch Case Company. You'll see that these are not marked F or GF, so these are not the cards that were illustrated by George Folsom. We don't know who created these, but they do have some amusing imagery. We have the birds that are talking to each other and comparing the time. We have a pig reading the paper and blowing his horn. We have a watch case head running a race, and we have a watch case head person jumping over the keystone. And then we have before and after cards. And according to Ben Crane, who's author of the Before and After Trade Card, there are three basic types of before and after cards. There are just plain before and after cards that show the results of using the product. We'll look at one of these in a minute. And then before, during, and after card shows one or more intermediate results. So it may show what was happening at the beginning before the person started using the product. And then you see some improvement, and then by the time they had taken 3 doses or whatever, they were in perfect health. And so you may see something that's progressive. That's before, during, and after. Or you'll see the with and without cards, where it compares the user of the advertised product with a non-user. And the before and after cards may be metamorphic cards. Those are trade cards that are a single piece that employ one or more folding parts to produce a change in the card's image. So let's look at one of these. This one is for the People Day Alarm Clock by Ansonia. There was this poor man, he had to get up early. And he was so afraid that he was going to sleep late that he sat up half the night. And his state was most unhappy. And he grew pale and wan. Look at that poor man. I mean, he is just really in serious condition. He's downtrodden. His clothes are rather slovenly looking. He has a bottle of, looks like probably one of the cure-all type medicines that was around at that time. And he has his watch there because he's keeping a constant eye on it. You'll see, too, just below his eyes, you'll see a line across there. So this bottom part of the card folds out. You find out all he had to do was get a People Day alarm clock. And when he got it, he could lay in bed snug. He was sure he would get up if at any time that the clock was set. He's fat and happy now always since he procured the People Day. So all it took, before he was sad and blue, but all it took was the alarm clock, and he was in perfect shape. So if you folded back that bottom part, look at the back. Hey, they even had an advertisement for the People Day carriage clock. So Ansonia made double use for this one. Not only were they advertising their alarm clock, they also were able to advertise their carriage clock on the back of it. So that was a before and after metamorphic clock. Now here's one from Waterbury that's a before and after. Mr. Jones buys a Swiss watch for $20. His watch is never correct, so of course he misses his train. So he takes his watch to the watchmaker, and he's told it's going to cost him $3 to repair it. He already paid $20 for it. He's going to have to pay $3 just because it doesn't keep good time. So forget that. He throws away the Swiss watch, and he buys a Waterbury. It only costs $4, and it can be repaired at a low price. So now he's always on time to catch his train, keep his engagements. And look at that, he's also a winner. He beats the record by the Waterbury. So before, he had this watch, he missed things, he was late all the time, did not reflect correctly on him, but all he had to do was buy a Waterbury watch. Before the watch, not so good. After the watch, he's a winner. And I mentioned earlier about the copyright at the bottom. This one does have a copyright information in the lower right-hand corner. You can barely see it in the white image there. We can tell from because if you're aware of Waterbury watches, the skeletonized dial was one of the very first ones that they created. So we know that this was an early watch, but we don't know exactly when. If we look at the lithographer's date along with it, this was by Ottman, was the lithographer, and he was in business from 1886 to 1900. Well, actually, he was. This one was Mayer, Merkel, and Ottman, and they were in business from 1874 to 1885. So we know that this card was first created sometime between 1874 and 1885. So what can we learn from trade cards? We've already seen what amazing things they can do for us. They can make us healthy, they can keep us on time, they can make us winners. But William Frost Mobley states it very well in the introduction to his Catalog 3, An American Enterprise. He said, these compelling miniature images pictorially and typographically display an absolute moment in time. The artist, largely unknown, translated the business, social, commercial, and moral concerns of their day. Whether inspired by the great excitement over the 1876 Centennial Exposition or by the need to make money selling fertilizer, the image translates hopes and dreams into a desire to purchase and consume. This time was a time that was very focused on consumerism. People had money. We were moving from an agrarian society to an industrial society. People had steady jobs. They had money. So they did have the desire to purchase and consume. So let's take a look at some of these little slices of life that we can learn from the trade cards. The first one here on the left is another Waterbury card. This one does not have a copyright date on it. It says, I'm all right, I've got Series J. Ma's all right, she's got Series L. The youngster, he's all right, he's got Series E. So if we know the history of Waterbury, we can date this pretty well. This is when they were first bringing out their short wine series. So we can tell about when it was, but we can also tell what's going on in the world at that time. Because if you looked at the one in the middle, the writing below the woman's dress is not a copyright name. It says that it's Mr. Lewis and Mrs. Gilbert. They were starring in their Broadway play, The Deacon and Liza. So just like we use stars, movie stars, television stars in our advertising today, that was already being done back during the time of the trade cards. Unfortunately, similar to some things today, they didn't always have the person's permission to use their image on the card, but you'll find the president, Grover Cleveland, and Mrs. Cleveland endorsed all sorts of things. Adelina Patti, the opera singer for whom the Patti clock is named, endorsed all sorts of things. They may or may not have been compensated for the use of their picture and their endorsement, but that is something that was being done. So we know stars were being used during this time, as well as a play that was popular during that time and some of the stars. Here's another one. This is Waterbury's take on the song Three Little Maids Are We from School Are We, as well as the actresses, and these were the actual actresses from the Mikado, which was all the rage in the mid to the late 1880s. So Waterbury took the words to the song. They, I don't like to say corrupted them, They made them applicable to Waterbury watches, and this was one of the cards that they had. This one was printed by Ottman. Ottman was 1886 to 1906, so we know that this one's a little bit later than the comic card that we saw earlier. This little card is actually a very small card. The beautiful imagery on this is Art Nouveau, and we know that this was popular around 1890 to 1910. So this one also is Ottman is the lithographer here. It's in the lower left-hand corner there. So we know that the card was created between 1886 and 1906, corresponds to the time when Art Nouveau imagery was popular. So can you see how we're looking at both what's on the card, possibly knowledge of the product, as well as of the lithographer? We're looking at clues here to be able to date some of these cards, to understand when during the phase of trade cards these were created. Chinese motifs were very popular, both the use of the Chinese people in the images and the use of Chinese artistic design elements. So you'll see both of these, all of these cards have an Oriental theme. Another theme that was very popular, and you may find people who collect trade cards with images of hot air balloons. There's so much going on these two lower pictures that you may not even pick up on the fact that the man is sitting in, his image is sitting on the balloon part of the hot air balloon. So we have the hot air balloon, we have a fan to the right with the tree and the birds on it, and then we have another one of the anthropomorphic characters with the watch case head on the left-hand side. Now these two cards are interesting because Keystone and Boss had extensive lines of trade cards. In fact, they are the most prolific of any of the horological cards that I've been able to come across. Not only did they have a lot of different images, these two bottom cards for Boss, most of the cards actually have 3 different color schemes that are available. They have the full color, one that's a peachy color, and one that's kind of pink and blue. So you may see these around. You may say, oh, I have that one, but then you start looking around and you find out, oh, but I don't have the peach one, or oh, but I don't have the pink and blue one. So keep your eyes out whenever you start looking at trade cards to see the different variations that there are. Maybe the same card, maybe a different card, but it's kind of fun to look at the difference between them. This is one that we don't see often today because times have changed. Depictions of children being punished for misbehavior was not uncommon in trade cards, and I've come across quite a few of them. The one on the left on the back is actually advertising a free giveaway, and it's targeted towards boys and girls to sell a product in order to win a watch. But what is home without a mother? I don't think this is the image I want my children to have of me, but apparently it was not uncommon at that time. And the one on the right-hand side, George Folsom, again, you'll see in the bottom corner of the Keystone, you'll see the GF there, and the boy who drove the spike is being punished. He said, you know that your pa never allows anyone but himself to use his Keystone improved silver watch case for a hammer. So, you know, it's not an uncommon theme, not one that we would see today. So again, that shows us a little bit more about the culture of that time period. And just a side note, as I mentioned with the Keystone that there are different color waves available on those cards, several of this shape of the Keystone cards, on this one, the Keystone in the background behind where it says jeweler is at an angle. There's also a line of these where the key is upright. The colors are slightly different. So whenever if you start collecting these or start looking at these, you may notice that there are 2 different variations on these the rectangular shaped Keystone cards. The advent of electricity generated by magnetos brought both fascination and fears of magnetism. So on the left, the fascination, they're eating magnetized food. While in the middle, because magnetism we know affects wristwatches, We have the Giles protective anti-magnetic shield, and we have James Muir and Sons with their crown-filled case to defy the lightning. So both of these, advent of electricity, fascination, and fears. And interestingly enough, the one on the left with the magnetized food, again, they target the child. Now my lively little card collector, Flora or Tommy, Clara or Georgie, Gracie or Johnny, take this pretty picture home and show it to Mama. So again, they're targeting the mother. Tell your mom you really want some of this food. How many of us have told our parents sometime in the past, oh, buy this cereal, Mom, look, it's really good for us. And besides that, inside there's some toy that I can have. So, yeah, those tactics, advertising tactics, giveaways have not changed. Depictions of Father Time in various forms were fairly common, but the Lancaster Watch Company card on the right was slightly an unusual take on the theme. The one on the left is Elgin watches, and this one is an oversized card. You may also see it with a black background rather than the white background, but both are embossed, and they have the gold Father Time and Elgin watches. The one in the center is another Keystone, again, not signed by George Folsom, and the one on the right is a Lancaster watch. And then I thought this one was pretty interesting. Normally I wouldn't have picked it up. It was just, you know, an engraved jeweler trade card. But then I looked on the back. Standard time was adopted by U.S. railroads late in 1883, but it did not become law until the 1918 Standard Time Act enacted standard time zones. So this one had a handy reference chart on the back. This jeweler was in Reading, Pennsylvania. It showed the time difference between Reading and various other locations. Constantinople, Berlin, Rome, Geneva, Paris. And interestingly enough, we think, because we're used to the standard time zones, it's 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours difference. No, it was in minutes and seconds, the difference between them. So again, look at the back of the card, see what it tells us. Factory views were fairly common because they represented the prosperity they created, and views of bustling harbors and trains were also popular. And this kind of goes along with the next one. Clocks often appeared on trade cards for other products, often symbolizing efficiency and time savings. And the efficient use of time characterized successful Victorian men and women who could use their time to achieve their goals. If you think back to that Waterbury comic card where the man threw away his Swiss watch, he became a winner by using his time effectively and by being able to be on time. So these are just little slices of life that when you look at a card, look at it, look at what's happening in the picture, read what it says, just to learn a little bit more about life at that time. So we talked earlier about how long these cards were in style, but what happened to them? Why did they pass out of vogue? What happened there? Several changes came about that led to the end of lithographed trade cards, but the primary cause was the increased distribution of magazines. Magazines were in every home. They were in the living room. People were reading them, passing them about. They were selling the subscriptions, as we saw on that one giveaway card. You'd bring in subscriptions to the newspaper or the magazines, and you were able to win a watch or a prize. So they had this increased distribution of magazines and advertising, and they also had the introduction of full-color ads that were available here. So trade cards went out of popularity. Some postcards started coming in, but we don't see as many advertising postcards as we did trade cards because, again, we had the magazines. There was no need to spend money on this additional advertising any longer. So what have we learned today about trade cards? Hopefully you've heard or seen something here today that provides insight into the art, history, evolution, and use of trade cards at the turn of the century. And most of all, I want to say thank you for your kind attention and for attending today. If you want to learn more, I want you to feel free. You can contact me by email. I won't say I know it all, but if I know of a source that can help you somewhere, I'll be glad to help you along. You can email me. You can call. A wonderful website that you can go to is the Trade Card Place, and it includes lists of trade card sources as well as contact resources, as well as contact information. Ron Shiver has made a list of horological trade cards. He does not include stock cards in general, but it is a list of horological trade cards. And his contact information is available on the Trade Card Place site. You can contact him and purchase one of these great lists. It's 11 pages front and back, so 22 pages in all. And he does have pictures of all the trade cards that he is aware of. So it's a really handy list to have. Then many of the following books can be found either new or used from eBay, Amazon, or other online booksellers like ABE Books. One of the books that's handy to have has a lot of pictures. Not too many of them are color, but it does have good pictures of jeweler trade cards. Jeweler's Trade Cards by Robert Allen Greene. The 19th century, the Trade Card in 19th Century America by Robert J. is a good overall reference book. Color Explosion. This is a book that lists who the lithographers were and when they were in business. And then if you want to just learn more about collecting different types of ephemera, not only trade cards, but all kinds of different printed ephemera. This is an older book by Maurice Rickards, I'm not sure how you say his name, but it has a really nice book and talks about how to properly display and store your cards and your other printed ephemera. If you're looking for something that's a little more technical about what was happening there and about advertising at that time, Advertising Progress, American Business and the Rise of Consumer Marketing, and the Admin and the Parlor both include chapters or sections on trade cards and their use and how they were impacting advertising at that time. And if anyone has any questions, I think Katie said that we would open the floor now for any questions.